That was some serious Bulldog on Bulldog crime as the Zags dominated from the opening tip to advance to the second round of the NCAA Tournament.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Thursday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Randy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. But we are live post-game here right after Gonzaga's dominant win over the Georgia Bulldogs in the first round of the 2025 NCAA Tournament. We're going to break down this performance, the nuclear shooting that we got from Nolan, Hickman, and Khalif battle in particular, what we loved from the Zags. A few things maybe we didn't love that we saw from the team. We'll also talk about our keys to victory that we laid out on Wednesday's episode, how those things played out in this matchup. And then we're going to close out the show looking a little bit ahead. We're going to do a more comprehensive episode about the Houston Cougars, Gonzaga's opponent, on Saturday. We'll have that episode up on Friday morning. But for now, we're going to talk about Houston's win over SIU Edwardsville, as well as the other games in this region. A couple that are just going on right now as Tennessee is tipping off against Wofford. We'll get you an live update at the end of the show on that game as well. We've got to start with just this incredible performance from Mark Few and the Zags. Gonzaga has not lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament since basically nobody knew who Steph Curry was, since he was at Davidson. He had a monstrous game against Gonzaga in that tournament way back in 2008, but that's the last time Gonzaga didn't win in the first round. And there was some real skepticism coming into this game. I think, frankly, I think that there was a lot of reasons to like the matchup with Georgia, but this was a tall team. This was a good rebounding team. This was a good defensive team. And we've had enough examples of Gonzaga struggling against teams that are tough and physical and do the things that Georgia does well. So there was reason to be a little bit skeptical. And I think Gonzaga put that to rest faster than I've ever seen them put that to rest in a basketball game. They're up 13-0 at the first media timeout in this game. If you've been a listener throughout the season and every day, or first of all, shout out to you. I appreciate you. If you're coming to the show new, also appreciate you as well. But one of the things we talked about a lot this season was that we wanted to see Gonzaga punish teams early, so much so that one thing I often cited was, I want to see the other team have to call a timeout before the first media timeout. Georgia didn't do that in this game, but they probably should have. They were down 11-0, and the broadcasters were like, well, we don't really need a timeout here, blah, blah, blah. And then I think Graham Ike scored, made it 13-0, and then that's when they called their timeout. But this thing was over from the get-go. Gonzaga was up 27-3 at the under 12 media timeout. I mean, it was a football score. Kirby Smart was not able to save this Georgia program from this kind of destruction that Gonzaga put on them in this basketball game. Yeah, they played more evenly in the second half, and I'm not worried about that. Georgia made some adjustments. Gonzaga made some counter adjustments. They did some things well in the second half, but they cooled off a little bit, as you might expect. But overall, I mean, the Zags shot 12 of 20 from three in this game, coming off of a game against St. Mary's in the WCC championship where they made 1 3, coming off frankly, last month of the season where Gonzaga really struggled to shoot the rock. Nolan Hickman was a pretty consistent three-point shooter throughout the year, but he'd have games, he wouldn't have a lot of bad shooting performances as much as he just kind of have quiet games where he didn't get a lot of shots up. Dusty Stromer's shot fell off. We never really saw the three-point shot materialize for Michael Ajayi or Ben Gregg this year. But in this game, the Zags go 12 of 20 from three, 60%. They were 12 of 18 until a couple garbage time missed threes. So it's even better than that, if you can believe it. And Nolan Hickman, we have to give him an individual shout out. What an incredible performance for him in this game. 5 of 6 from three, 18 points overall, 3 assists. He was perfect 3 of 3 from the free throw line. He had a pair of threes super early in this game. I think in the first 3 minutes, he already had 6 points. Mike White mentioned it in his timeout interview with the sideline reporter. Like, we got to find a way to slow down Nolan Hickman. They never really did. This is a player who very clearly did not want his college basketball career to end in Wichita in the first round of the NCAA tournament. He went out and said, no, we're gonna find a way to get this done. And it wasn't just him. He wasn't the only guard on this team who really didn't want his career to end, because Khalif Battle had a tremendous performance as well. This is the version, and I've said this so many times on the show, we have seen what Khalif Battle can be. We didn't see it consistently, although expecting him to come in and consistently be that version of Khalif Battle, frankly, would have been ignoring the fact that he has 5 previous years of history as a college basketball player that indicate that consistency is probably not going to be the thing that you get from Khalif Battle. But when he is on, he makes this team, their ceiling is national championship when he plays like that. He hasn't played like that consistently. He doesn't often play that well for 6 games in a row. But in this performance in particular, 24 points for Khalif Battle, 9 of 13 from the field, 4 of 7 from 3, 2 of 2 from the free throw line. He added 8 rebounds. He was tenacious on the glass, flying up and grabbing boards in times they really needed them. He also had a pair of steals in this game. Khalif Battle played Georgia twice last year when he was on Eric Musselman's Arkansas team. In those 2 games combined, Battle scored 3 points. This time he scored 24 points and just was electric. Not only hitting threes, but you could get him the ball late in shot clock situations. He would drive to the rim. He had a few possessions where he kind of was patient with the basketball, waited till a lane opened up and got himself to the rim. He had an incredible up and under acrobatic move with a little English on it that was just beautiful, like something you don't see. Even NBA players would be kind of dropping their jaw looking at that possession and that move from Battle. It was one of the prettiest shots I've seen. When those kind of shots are going down for Khalif Battle, I mean, this team is just so unbelievably difficult to stop. We've got to mention Braden Huff, too. Gonzaga went with the 2 big lineup. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the second segment, but they started Huff together alongside Graham Ike, obviously getting out to that 13-0, 27-3 start. You know that those guys in that starting lineup had an impact on this game, but Huff was tremendous from start to finish. 18 points for him. He had 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. He was 8 of 11 from the field, including knocking down his 1 3-point attempt in this game. I thought this was a great Braden Huff game, not just offensively, like scoring around the rim, which he's always been good at, but this is one of his better rebounding games. I've criticized Braden Huff on this show for not being a great rebounder. I've pointed out that oftentimes you'll have games where Ike and Huff play the same amount of minutes. They even score the same amount of points, and Graham will finish with 12 rebounds and Braden will have 1. And you can see the difference when they're subbing in and out for each other in terms of how many offensive rebounds Gonzaga gives up and in how many defensive rebounds they don't get at times because of Braden Huff. But in a game where Gonzaga needed the rebounding because Georgia is great on the offensive glass, Gonzaga out-rebounds Georgia by 7 in this game, and Braden Huff's rebounding was a huge part of it. He chased his own shots, got misses, just really, really good stuff from him. His toughness, his physicality, things that haven't necessarily been strengths of his all the time, looked really good in this game and was in. Boy, we're going to need that against Houston, a team that's incredibly tough and incredibly physical. A timid version of Braden Huff's not going to fly against the Cougs, and he certainly didn't look like that in this contest. Got to shout out Gonzaga's defense as well. Held Georgia 35% from the field. The Bulldogs shot 5 of 26 from 3. They also had 13 turnovers. 10 of them came in the first half as Gonzaga's defense was swarming, and it just felt like Mike White's team was wholly unprepared for the start of this basketball game. Not a lot of bad stuff to talk about in this game. We always do the good and the bad in the first segment, so we'll be fairly quick on the bad stuff. The bench just had 13 points. A lot of that came in garbage time at the under 12 in the second half. Gonzaga only had 5 points from their bench. I think it was 3 from Emmanuel Innocente, 2 from Ben Gregg. They ultimately ended up with 13 points. Ajayi finished with 4 points, but was just 1 of 4. Ben Gregg finished with 4 points, just 1 of 2. Those guys didn't have a huge impact on this game offensively. Decent rebounding stuff, decent defensive stuff from them at times. Foul trouble was an issue for them, but just not a lot of contribution from the bench in this contest. Braden Huff was 1 of 4 from the free throw line. I only mentioned that because the rest of the team was 10 of 11. So it could have been a really, really great free throw shooting game, but Braden Huff, not so great from the line. Not a huge issue. Just, again, we're grasping at straws to find some of the negative stuff in a game that Gonzaga dominated from start to finish. There was a flagrant 1 called on Graham Ike. I didn't love the call, but it just didn't matter. It was an incidental elbow. That I shouldn't say I didn't love the call. I don't love the rule. I've said that a handful of times. I just don't like the rule. It was very obviously unintentional. I don't think that should be a flagrant 1. Whatever. It's happened before. It's probably going to happen again. It's just the nature of the beast. The Florida foul calls were very much leaning towards Georgia. Gonzaga committed 23 fouls. Georgia only committed 13, or were only called for 13. Georgia's really good at getting to the line, though, so I wasn't really surprised to see that be a big difference. And again, it ultimately didn't matter all that much. Ryan Nembhard, uncharacteristically off night for him. 5 turnovers. He did have 8 assists, so it's not like it was a terrible night. And he also only had 3 points, but he was 1 of 3 from the field. He knocked down a 3 early in this game and then missed a couple other shots, and that was pretty much it. It was sort of quiet from him, but I think the fact that Gonzaga could dominate an SEC team with a quiet night from presumably their best player is honestly a good thing. Like, it's Nembhard's performance wasn't great, but the fact that he had an off night on a day that Gonzaga was leading by 20 for most of the game is a really promising sign of things to come for the Zags going forward in the rest of the tournament, which is what we're going to talk about later in the show. We're going to continue to talk about this game here between Gonzaga and Georgia, because one of our keys to the game was to see Gonzaga get off to a hot start. Check, mission accomplished for that one. We're going to talk about that and a few other keys coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. My wife and I always want to make sure that we are on the same page when it comes to our finances. And thankfully, with Monarch Money, managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Today's episode is also brought to you by the fine folks at Game Time. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd. I'm sure it was electric in Wichita earlier today, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. So getting tickets, it just shouldn't be stressful. And that's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time picks, curates, makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater shows, and more. I just checked the Game Time app. Honestly, there are so many great deals on matchups still to come this season. The lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 100%, 110% of the difference. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still recapping this incredibly fun wire-to-wire dominant victory for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs over the Georgia Bulldogs out of the SEC. Gonzaga, of course, jumping out to a monster lead, got up over 20 points early in this game, and while Georgia cut it down to 15, maybe 12 at one point, I'm not even sure if it was within 12, this thing was fairly well in hand for the Zags right out of the gates. And our first key for Gonzaga coming into this game was, how are they going to start? Because as it happens every single year, and obviously, as we talked about earlier, Gonzaga has won every first-round game they've played since 2008, so clearly it hasn't impacted them. But a big storyline every year for Gonzaga is the fact that the WCC tournament finishes a week earlier than all of the power conference tournaments, most of just all of college basketball's conference tournaments as well. So most of the time, Gonzaga is playing a team that has played 1, maybe 2, sometimes 3 games more recently than Gonzaga has. Sometimes that can be to the disadvantage of the team Gonzaga is playing, but sometimes for Gonzaga, they're a little bit rusty. Now, Georgia, because they lost early in the SEC tournament, they got upset by a 14-seeded Oklahoma. Their last game was a day after Gonzaga's last game. So both these teams came in. Gonzaga was on a 9-day gap. Georgia was on an 8-day gap. So it was kind of up in the air on which team's going to maybe come out a little bit flat. Well, the question was answered very quickly, as we talked about already. That 13-0 start for Gonzaga, forcing turnovers early in this game, drilling threes. Like we said, Hickman hit that three early. Graham got going down on the block early. Braden scored early. Nemhart hit a three early. Battle, like everybody, I think Gonzaga's 5 of 6 from their first 6 field goal attempts, and I believe every starter scored. Like this team just was spread the love, spread the wealth, forcing turnovers. Like we said, Georgia had 7 turnovers in the first 7 minutes of this game, had 6 turnovers in the rest of the game altogether, but that was still enough for Gonzaga to build a big lead that Mike White and the Bulldogs just really couldn't get out of in this game. Key number 2 for Gonzaga was to get steals and capitalize in transition. This Georgia team turns the ball over a ton. Turnover issues were flagrant throughout the season for Georgia. They also, not only do they turn the ball over a lot, they get the ball stolen from them a lot. Like that was a main point. Ken Palm's data showed that they were like 290th in the country in terms of how often the ball gets stolen from them. So this is something that was an issue for Georgia throughout the year. And like we said, Georgia had 5 turnovers in the first 3 minutes and 16 seconds of this game. They'd already turned the ball over 5 times. They had 7 turnovers at the 13-minute and 49-minute mark. So, or 49-second mark. So we were 6 minutes and change into this basketball game. Georgia had already turned it over 7 times. Like we said, they only turned it over 6 times in the 33 minutes remaining in this basketball game, but the damage had already been done. At halftime, Gonzaga had a 20-2 advantage in terms of points off turnovers. 18 more points scored by Gonzaga. They were up by I think 21, 22 at halftime. So the difference in the halftime score was effectively Gonzaga's points off of turnovers. Gonzaga had 4 steals at halftime. They only finished with 5 steals. Like we said, Georgia did a much better job of taking care of the basketball in the second half, but they just weren't able to get the offense going. They took better care of the ball, but they still didn't make enough shots. The defense was still too lackadaisical on Gonzaga's outside shooters that Gonzaga was able to maintain their lead again. In the second half, Gonzaga didn't outscore Georgia by much, but it was because Georgia tightened up some of those things, but their defense still just wasn't good enough to slow down Gonzaga. And while one of the big keys we had in this game was containing Asa Newell, the freshman forward for Georgia, Gonzaga didn't do a great job of slowing down Asa Newell, but nobody else stepped up for Georgia. One of the big things for us was not only slowing down Asa Newell, but keeping him off the offensive glass. And folks, if you hadn't watched Georgia yet this year, if you hadn't watched Asa Newell, and maybe you just listened to the pregame episode where I talked about Asa Newell and his offensive rebounding prowess, like, I hope you came away impressed with his game, because I did. I've seen him a couple of times this year in the SEC, and he's a tremendous – his nose for the basketball is something else. He just seemed to always be – and at first it just seemed like, oh, that ball just bounced right to him. And it's like, okay, when that happens 5 times in a game, every game, it's not that the ball's bouncing right to him. It's that he's got a nose for the basketball. He knows where it's going to be. He can go out and get it. Sure, sometimes it was because he was putting a body on Nolan Hickman, but he out-rebounded some of Gonzaga's best players on the glass because he's just a tremendous athlete, really good at finding those seams and finding the spot where the ball is going to be. He finished this game, 20 points for him. UGA had 13 offensive rebounds in this game, which is a pretty high number. Newell had 6 of them. Again, he was just a menace on the glass. The amount of times he got offensive rebounds, went straight back up with the basketball, scored, got fouled. He did that a few times, kicked the ball out for an open 3 at one point on an offensive rebounds. Like, just really good stuff from Asa Newell. I was impressed with him, more saddened that he didn't come to Gonzaga because he would have been a really tremendous player in this program. But now hopeful for my Portland Trailblazers to be selecting him somewhere in the first round of this upcoming NBA draft, because I really enjoyed watching him play. But again, for Gonzaga, you can't, if Asa Newell, again, Asa Newell is a tremendous player. If he's going to get 6 offensive rebounds, that's not going to fly against Houston. This team is so tough. They're so physical. They don't have anybody that tall. Newell's 6'11". Houston's bigs are like all 6'9", but they're so physical and they're so demanding down low. If Gonzaga's giving second chance points to Houston, they're going to lose that basketball game. That is an incredibly critical thing for the Zags to avoid in that contest in particular. Key number 4 coming into this game was for Gonzaga to force Georgia to make outside shots, keep them out of the paint, keep them off the free throw line. Georgia got more free throw attempts than we would have liked, but Gonzaga did a good job of forcing them to shoot threes. We said they shoot about 22 threes per game, even though they are not a good three-point shooting team. I think their average on the season is like 7 of 22 from 3 per game. And Gonzaga got them to shoot 26. Obviously, a pretty easy way to force a team to shoot a bunch of threes is to jump out to a 20-point lead because they got to score points to get back into the game. So they were settling for threes more often than I think they would have liked. But this was also a testament to Gonzaga's hounding on-ball defense. Guys like Emmanuel Innocente and Khalif Battle and Nolan Hickman really working hard to keep guys like Silas Demery and Blue Kane in front of them as much as possible, forcing Georgia to settle for trying to drive, stopping at the mid post and having to kick it out to find a shooter. A lot of contested late in the shot clock 3-point attempts from Georgia, which is exactly what Gonzaga wanted them to do. And it resulted in the Bulldogs shooting 5 of 26 from three. They were 0-4 from three in the first 8 minutes. They didn't make their first three till about 10 minutes in. They were 1 of 13 from three at halftime. They finished 4 of 13 in the second half. So a little bit better, but still overall a pretty hideous game shooting the basketball for Georgia. We kind of knew if Georgia doesn't shoot well, there's no way they're going to win this basketball game. And that was the case here. Dakota LaFou off the bench, one of their better shooters, was 1 of 7. Newell was 0 of 2. Silas Demery, their best 3-point shooter, was 2 of 6. Blue Kane, 2 of 5. But ultimately, not a good shooting performance for Georgia in a game that they needed to shoot well above their season average to really hang with the Zags. Didn't happen, didn't result in them hanging with the Zags really at all in this game. And then key number 5, we've already talked about it a little bit. Wanted to see Gonzaga play the bigs together again. I wasn't sure if they were going to start Huff alongside EK, which we saw them do, of course, in the WCC championship game against St. Mary's. Did they do that mostly just because they wanted to give Randy Bennett and the Gales a different look? Like, are we going to go back to the traditional starting lineup with Ben? I was worried about staggering fouls with Huff and EK both out there at the same time. You run the risk of them both picking up early fouls and potentially hurting your depth. Mark Few said, no, we're going to do it. Georgia's the 9th tallest team in college basketball. According to Ken Palm, they're a great rebounding team. And while Huff coming into this game wasn't the better rebounder, Ajayi and Greg are arguably better rebounders than Huff. Having his size, I think, was something that Mark Few identified of, like, we want to be able to stop Santos Cyril and Asa Newell, the two 6'11" bigs for them. And again, it worked. Huff had a great game, 18 points, 8 rebounds. EK had a great game. Neither of them were super dominant in the first half. Huff had 7 of his 18 in the first half. EK had 4 of his 13 in the first half because Gonzaga dominated with the 3-point shot in the first half. But then in the second half, those two guys both went to work, got a lot of easy touches around the rim, and kept themselves at arm's length away from Georgia by scoring effortlessly around the rim. The two guys combined to shoot 14 of 20. I'm going to tell you right now, if Gonzaga's shooting 60% from three and their two bigs are shooting 70% on 2-pointers, they're going to win a whole heck of a lot of basketball games. If you combine that with the fact that they slowed down Georgia's offense tremendously, they're going to win just about every game. We'll see how this carries over into a game against Houston on Saturday. And that's what I want to talk about to close out the show, because Houston made very quick work of SIU Edwardsville, their first round opponent. Now they're going to get set to take on Gonzaga, a 1-versus-8 matchup. Houston probably not thrilled about playing a red hot Gonzaga team, but we're going to talk about what they did against SIUE and what Gonzaga can do a little bit to potentially take this team down. We'll also talk about the results for Purdue, Clemson. We'll talk about this Tennessee game as well. All of that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, with the NCAA tournament here, 5-Hour Energy, it has your back. Because the extra sunshine, it means more time for fun, but sometimes you just need a little boost to power your way through. And whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament like yours truly, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or if you're just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I've been staying up late covering the NCAA tournament. The earliest I've gone to bed is a little after midnight this month. And I'm going to tell you what, 5-Hour Energy, it is just the jolt that I need to help keep me going the next day. Whether I'm at a game, whether I'm traveling, 5-Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. So head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. If you need one now, grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. All right, folks, closing out the show, moving on from Gonzaga's win over Georgia. We could sit here and celebrate that show all night long, and I will, from the comfort of my own home. But for here on the podcast, we're going to move on and talk about what Houston did. Gonzaga's second-round opponent now solidified on Saturday. As I'm recording this right now, time of that game, TV information still to be determined. But Houston made very light work of SIU Edwardsville, wins this game 78-40. Houston has done this all season long. They don't play a lot of bad teams. They had a pretty strong non-conference schedule, and most of the teams in the Big 12 are good. But when Houston plays bad teams, they dominate them. And I say bad, I don't want to be disrespectful to SIUE. This was their first time making the NCAA tournament in program history. That's a tremendous accomplishment. But this is not a program that hangs with Houston. And while it's not a program that hangs with Auburn or Duke or Florida or St. John's or Michigan State, the 2 seeds as well, I doubt most of those teams would nearly double them up. But Houston, against teams that they're just more athletic than, more physical than, they just absolutely grind them into dust. And that's what they did here. A couple facts about this upcoming matchup. Again, we will have much more about Gonzaga and Houston in the matchup coming up on Friday, but this is the first matchup between 2 teams in the NCAA tournament who have 5+ year streaks of making the Sweet 16. So the first time that 2 teams, I should say, are meeting in the round of 32, where both of them have been to the Sweet 16 in 5 or more consecutive years. Gonzaga, of course, 9 years in a row. Houston, I believe, is at exactly 5 years in a row. One of those streaks is going to end. And it's what an exciting matchup. Obviously, I think a big part of the storyline is how the heck was Gonzaga an 8 seed? We've talked about that already on the show. I understand the committee had a challenge with Gonzaga, but boy, like the best thing you can do if you feel like you were underseeded is go prove it and make yourself look good. Everybody thought Louisville was underseeded, including yours truly. I still do, but Louisville didn't change anybody's mind by losing to number 9 seed Creighton. Gonzaga probably changed some people's mind. People who thought, oh, they should have been an 8 seed. Well, now it looks maybe a little bit different after that win over Georgia. Both these teams have coaches with over 700 career wins. Kelvin Sampson, of course, for Houston, and Mark Few at Gonzaga. This is also the first matchup between these 2 teams in the NCAA tournament. Those are a few Houston-Gonzaga-related facts for Houston in this game. They only scored 20. They scored 52 points in the first half. They were up 52-24 at halftime. So kind of like Gonzaga, they had this thing well in the bag before the second half even began. They only scored 26 points in the second half, though, but they only gave up 16. SIU Edwardsville had 24 points at halftime and finished with 40, just 16 points in the second half. Houston's defense locked in. They play at a super slow pace. They're tough. They're physical. They're gritty. And they just, like I said, ground this team purely into dust. They out-rebounded SIUE 50-27. That included 19 offensive rebounds for Houston. Houston's probably not going to be able to get 19 offensive rebounds against Gonzaga. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're longer, all that stuff. But giving up offensive rebounds is a concern for Gonzaga. It happened against Georgia. It was one of the few things they didn't do great in this game. It happened in all 3 games against St. Mary's. Granted, in the last game, there was just thousands of rebounds because neither team could shoot the ball at all. But this is an area of concern for Gonzaga, and Houston will destroy you if you let them get a bunch of second chance opportunities. So that is a big time concern for Gonzaga coming into this game. Houston also shot 10 of 28 from 3. It's about 35.7%. It's interesting. Houston came into this game. They're the second highest percentage 3-point shooting team in the country, the 39.8% coming into this game. But that was kind of misleading because they don't shoot very many threes. So it was like, okay, like Ken Palm's going to label them the second best 3-point shooting team in the country, but would you actually say they're a better 3-point shooting team than a team like Alabama or any other team that shoots 28, 25 threes a game and makes 12 to 15 of them? If Houston's going like 4 of 7 every game, like that doesn't really matter. So of course, that's the narrative for Houston coming into the tournament. They go ahead and shoot 28 threes in this game against SIUE. And again, they lowered their percentage a little bit. They were 39, they're 35% in this game. But I'm gonna tell you right now, if Houston shoots 20 plus threes against Gonzaga and they shoot 35+%, that's probably not going to be a good situation for Gonzaga. This Houston team, they're not super reliant on the 3-point shot, but if they are knocking them down, that is a problem for Gonzaga. LJ Cryer, 15 points, 4 of 9 from 3 in this one. Milos Uzan, their starting point guard, who they added from Oklahoma in the transfer portal. He's really come on as of late. He had a monster game in this one. He had 16 points, 6 of 7 from the field, including perfect 2 of 2 from 3. He also had 3 assists and 3 rebounds. Javier Francis came off the bench to have 14 points and 8 rebounds. The Houston defense was the main winner in this contest. They held SIUE to 15 of 49 shooting, which is about 30.5%, 2 of 24 from 3, 8% for SIUE. Gonzaga or Houston's defense is phenomenal. That's going to be a big storyline coming into this game is how they slow down Gonzaga's much more high octane offense in this contest on Saturday. Other region games here quickly before we get you out and on with the rest of your day. Number 4, Purdue beat number 13 seed High Point, 75-63, the final there. Purdue kind of let High Point hang around for most of this game. The Boilermakers have a significant issue with depth. Trey Kaufman-Renn, their starting center, is fantastic. Braden Smith, their starting point guard, obviously fantastic, All-American candidate. Fletcher Lawyer's their third best player. He's good, but he's not great. And the team kind of goes by whether he's playing well. If they have three players playing well, they tend to win. If they have two players playing well, they tend to struggle a little bit more. And unfortunately, they rarely have another player step up. They have good players on this roster, Cameron Heide, Miles Colvin, CJ Cox, but they're very inconsistent. Purdue wins this game, not feeling great about where they're at right now. Would be potentially Gonzaga's third round matchup if they were to get past Houston, because they're going to be taking on the 12 seed McNeese, the Cowboys, Will Wade's team, playing Clemson. Very interesting storyline here. Will Wade used to be at Clemson, went to Clemson, so he's playing his alma mater, which is always a fun storyline. But Will Wade also recently accepted the head coaching job at NC State. So whenever McNeese is done, whether that's Saturday, whether that's next weekend, whether they make it all the way to the Final Four, once McNeese is done in this tournament, Will Wade is going to take over as the head coach at NC State in the ACC, where they will face Clemson. So for this game, Clemson was facing a coach that they're going to end up seeing 2 to 3 times a year in the ACC starting next year. Just a weird dynamic as we have in college basketball programs desperately trying to get coaches hired as soon as possible with the transfer portal opening up in 4 days. They want to have their coach in line. They want to have their coach ready to start recruiting in the portal and keeping their players in line and keeping the players on the roster. So it's created some unique situations with coaches leaving programs in the tournament and various things like that. In this game, McNeese was up huge all game. 31-13 was the lead at halftime. I was shocked. 13 points for Clemson at halftime in this game. And yet Clemson scored 40 points in the final 12 minutes of this game, got this thing to within 2. They only lost by 2. 69-67 was the final score. You look at that and you might think, oh, wow, I bet McNeese hit like a game winner. No, McNeese just held on for dear life. They had a lead. They crushed Clemson. This game was actually following a similar trajectory to the Gonzaga Georgia game in terms of like what the score looked like for most of the contest. This would be like if Georgia came all the way back and Gonzaga only won by 2, which many of you would be recovering from some heart palpitations in a significant way. Had that happened, yours truly would be as well. But McNeese still finds a way to get the W, advances. They will take on Purdue in the round of 32. Winner of that game will take on the winner of Houston Gonzaga. Later tonight, we will have UCLA versus Utah State. That's the 7 seed UCLA versus the 10 seed Utah State. That game is slated to start now at 6:25 p.m. on Thursday night. Again, recording this live right now. As many of you are listening to this, that game is likely already ended. That game will be on TNT. FanDuel favoring UCLA by 5.5. And then we're at halftime in the Tennessee-Wofford game. 2 seed Tennessee, 15 seed Wofford. It's 36-27, so a fairly close game for Tennessee. I know they got off to a strong start, so they must have really slowed down in the second half of the first half. We'll see if Tennessee can find a way to pull off a win here, or if Wofford can do the unthinkable. Rick Barnes has really struggled in March for his career. Would definitely be a notable ding on his resume if he were to lose to a 15 seed here in 2025. Folks, that is going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Thank you to those of you who are joining live as well. Don't do a lot of lives, but thought this would be fun. Glad to have you all here with me. Always fun to do stuff like this. We'll try to do something like this after Saturday's game as well. I'm going to have a fun show for you all, recorded either later tonight on Thursday or Friday morning, getting you more ready for Gonzaga's matchup against Houston as well. Thanks for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I know I will. And as always, go Zags.